Now we move to the supply side of the market. Remember, we said that a market consists of two sides, the demand side and the supply side. So now we move to talk about the supply side of the market. Okay? Of course, the supply, what actually what does supply means in economics? What does supply mean in economics? Of course, in economics, the word supply refers to the willingness and ability of sellers, of producers, to produce and offer to sell different quantities of a good at different prices during a certain period of time, per day, per week, etc. Okay? Great. So this definition is similar to the word demand. You know, when we define the word demand, we said demand refers to the willingness and ability of consumers to purchase or buy, different quantities of a good at different prices during a certain period of time, per day, per week, per month, and so on and so forth. The same thing, supply basically goes to the suppliers, goes or is related to the suppliers, is related to the producers, those who produce, who offer to sell goods and services. So therefore, the word supply means or refers to the willingness and ability of producers or sellers to offer for sale different quantities of a good at different prices during a certain period of time, perhaps per day, perhaps per hour, perhaps per month, per week. So the definition is, similar to the previous one regarding the demand. So as you can see, two key terms in this definition, which is willingness and ability. Willingness by itself, it does not mean that the supply will exist. And ability by itself doesn't mean that supply will exist. So both willingness and ability should exist, for supply to take place. The law of supply. What dictates the supply is the law of supply. The law of supply, similar to the law of demand. The law of demand is related to the demand, is related to the consumers, to the purchasers, to the buyers. The law of supply is related to the producers, to the sellers. So what does the law say? The law says the higher the price of a good or a service, the higher is the price of a good or a service, the higher is the quantity supplied, ceteris paribus. Remember the term ceteris paribus, which means everything else is the same. So when the price goes up, it's expected that producers will offer to sell higher quantities. Okay, because the higher price usually gives producers an incentive to produce more. This means that the law of supply means that we have a direct relationship between the price and price of the good and the quantity supplied. So with respect to the demand, we notice that based upon the law of demand, that we have an inverse relationship between the price of the good and the quantity demanded of that good. However, in this law, the law of supply, here we can see a direct or a positive relationship between the price of a good and the quantity supplied. When the price goes up, the price of a good goes up, the quantity supplied will go up. And when the price of a good goes down, it's expected the quantity supplied also goes down. Of course, here, remember that ceteris paribus, it means everything is the same. Just we are focusing upon the change in the price and the change in the quantity supplied. Now, of course, if there is a positive relationship between the price of a good and the quantity supply, then how do we expect the supply curve to look like? Exactly, the supply curve will be upward sloping, as you can see over here. So the supply curve is upward sloping. However, the demand curve we studied is downward sloping. So the supply curve is upward sloping because of the law of supply. The higher the price, the higher the quantity supplied. QSX, it is here talking about, the quantity supplied of good X, and here the price of good X, and here SX, it means the supply of good X. Great. And here, of course, we give an example, supply schedule, and here, the demand curve, supply curve. Here, supply curve. Okay? So the supply curve is the graphical representation of the supply schedule. Supply schedule is the numerical representation of the supply of the law of supply. This is the law of supply. The price 1, the quantity supply is 10. The price increases to 2, we expect the quantity supply to increase. It's now here increased to 15, and so on and so forth. So we have a positive relationship, and we take these numbers and plug them over here, and we come up with an upward sloping supply curve. Now, notice the following. The law of supply does not hold when there is no time to produce more units of a good. More units of a good. Therefore, remember, according to the law of supply, when the price of a good goes up, then the quantity supply will go up. But imagine that you are in a movie theater, and the movie theater only has, suppose, 1,000 seats. Only 1,000 seats. And the ticket is $5 to get in. Okay? Now, the 1,000 seats are filled. So, which means even if the price of the ticket goes up, the quantity supplied still the same, no changes, because there is no time to produce more units of a good, no time to produce more seats. Therefore, the law of supply does not hold when there is no time to produce more of a good. Just the example I just presented. When there is no time to produce more units of a good, it means the law of supply doesn't hold. And the law of supply actually holds when the price goes up, the quantity supplied goes up. But in this case, the price of ticket goes up, however, no more seats that can be produced. Therefore, the law of supply in this case does not hold. Same thing, the law of supply also does not hold for goods that cannot be produced over any period of time. Of course, here, let's say if we're talking about some, picture, drawn many years ago by a famous drawer or artist, okay? And so it cannot be produced anymore. So we have one great famous picture drawn by a famous artist. Let's say 100 years was drawn, for 100 years. So therefore, you can't produce, you cannot produce more pictures or drawings. Therefore, the law of supply also does not hold for that type of situation. Notice that here in these cases, the supply curve is not upward sloping. So in the case 1 here, when there is no time to produce more, and when goods cannot be produced over any period of time, here we expect the supply curve to be vertical. Supply curve in this case and that case is vertical. It's vertical when there is no time to produce more units of a good, and when the goods cannot be produced anymore. such as a famous drawing drawn, let's say, many decades by somebody who died, suppose, and so you cannot reproduce that drawing. Therefore, the supply curve in this case is going to be vertical rather than upward sloping. It's vertical at the amount of drawing already drawn, or at the amount of seats in the theater, suppose. Let's say 1,000 seats, so we have a vertical supply curve only at one intersection, the horizontal axis at 1,000 seats only. So even the price increases, the price of ticket increases, but still you're going to have 1,000 seats. You can't produce more seats. Okay? Now, why most supply curves are upward sloping? Remember that, you already said that supply curve is upward sloping. The demand curve is downward sloping. Now, the question is that why most supply curves are upward sloping? An upward sloping supply curve reflects the fact that under certain conditions, we're going to see what those conditions. A higher price is an incentive to producers to produce more of a good. The incentives comes in the form of higher profits. For example, suppose, the good that we are producing is apples. Suppose that the price per unit, the price of apples rises and nothing else changes. For instance, the per unit cost of apples remain the same. So producers will earn higher profits per unit, perhaps per kilogram or per ton of apples will earn higher profits. And that by itself will give them an encouragement to increase their production, okay, and increase the amount offered for sale. Here we're talking about certain conditions. Of course, the conditions here, of course, we said that will suppose the per unit cost, remain the same. Now, however, generally, though, the increased production of a good doesn't come at fixed or constant per unit cost. The increased production of a good doesn't come at fixed or constant per unit cost. First, we assume that the per unit cost remain fixed. And that's why producers, will be encouraged to produce more because they will earn higher profits per unit. Now, remember, the increased production of a good doesn't come at fixed cost. Remember that the law of increasing opportunity cost, or the law of increasing cost that we have learned in the previous chapter, that law is usually at work, which says increase the production of a good or a service comes at increased opportunity cost. Therefore, an upward sloping supply curve simply reflects the fact that all costs will increase as more units of a good are produced. Now we move to, differentiate between individual supply curve and market supply curve. We have already talked about individual demand curve and market demand curve. So here we're talking about what is the difference between an individual supply curve and a market supply curve. Of course, an individual supply curve is the price quantity combinations. Price quantity combinations, for a single price quantity combinations for a single seller. Price quantity combination of a good for a single seller, for a single producer. However, the market supply curve represents the price quantity combinations for all sellers of a certain good. As you see down here, how we derive the market supply schedule and the market supply curve. Say for instance, the economy consists of two sellers, two producers, Ahmad and Rami. The economy consists of only two producers or two sellers, Ahmad and Rami. This is here the market the market supply schedule, which consists of Ahmad Rami. As you can see, when the price increases, what will happen to the quantity supplied or produced by Ahmad? It increases. The same thing, when the price of the good increases, what happens to the quantity supplied by Rami? Also it increases. Now, to find the quantity supplied of all producers, all we have to do at each price, we just add the quantities supplied by Ahmad and Rami. So at the price 1, we just add 5 plus 2, 7. 5 plus 2, 7. This is the quantity supplied of all producers. The same thing for 2, 3, and 4. We just add the quantity supplied of Ahmad and Rami. So this is here the market schedule, okay? The supply schedule of Ahmad, Rami, and all producers. Now we can, take these numbers and, draw the individual supply curve for Ahmad, the individual supply curve for Rami, as well as the market supply curve. As you remember, the supply curve is the graphical representation of the supply schedule. Okay. Now, as you can see, we just have the price numbers along the vertical axis, and we have the quantity supplied along the horizontal axis for each curve, for each graph. So as you can see, the supply curve of Ahmad is upward sloping. SA, the supply curve of Ahmad. SR, the supply curve of Rami. Of course, it's upward sloping. And here, the market supply curve of SM, the supply of the market, is also upward sloping, which is, of course, to calculate the market supply curve. As I said, we just take the numbers here, because at each price, we just add, the quantity supply of all producers in the market. And this is here the market supply curve and the individual supply curves. As you can see, the individual supply curve is upward sloping. Also, the market supply curve is upward sloping. Okay, now we move to talk about the factors or the shifter factors that cause a shift in the supply schedule or supply curve. Okay, we have already talked about the shifter factors of demand. Now we talk about the factors that cause a shift in the supply curve. They are called shifter factors. Okay. Now the first one is prices of relevant resources. Resources are needed to produce goods. For instance, apple is a resource used to produce apple jam. So as you see, to produce a good, we need resources. So for instance, if a company wants to produce apple jam, so it needs apple. So apple is a resource that is used to produce apple jam. Therefore, as the price of apple goes down, then the cost of producing apple jam, will increase. The cost of producing apple jam will go down. Therefore, producing apple jam will become less costly. And this means that the firm is able to produce more apple jams because the price of apple has gone down. So what happens? The supply curve of apple jam will increase. That is, it will shift to the right. So when the price of resource decreases, that means the cost of producing the good that depends on the resource becomes less costly. Therefore, the firm is able to produce more of that good. The second factor that causes a shift in the supply curve is technology. An advanced level of technology allows producers to produce more output with a fixed amount of resources, reducing per unit production cost. What actually is technology? What do we mean when we say technology? Technology basically is the body of skills and knowledge concerning the use of resources in order to produce goods and services. So, usually an advanced level of technology, it will allow the producer to produce more output with a fixed amount of resources. Let me give an example. If it takes $10 to produce 10 units of a good, this means that the per unit cost is $1. Say with an advanced level of technology, the firm is able to produce 20 units of that good with a cost of $10. That implies the cost per unit has gone down to half. So now the firm is able to produce that good with only one half of the cost before the introduction of the advanced level of technology. So an advanced level of technology will allow the firm to produce, more output with a fixed amount of resources, which means reducing the per unit cost of production. And that will cause the supply curve to shift to the right, as you can see over here. Prices of other goods. Farmers sometimes, they switch production from one good to another, depending on the prices of the good they are producing. Let's say a farmer is now producing wheat. Suddenly he realizes that the price of corn rises or relative to the price of wheat. So what this increase in the price of the other good that the farmer is able to plant or produce, then causes the farmer to switch production from wheat to corn. Why? Because the price of corn has gone up relative to the price of wheat. Why should the farmer continue to produce wheat if he is realizing or seeing that the price of the other good, which is corn, is higher than the price of wheat, and he is able to produce corn. So he will switch, production, of course, from wheat to corn. Okay. Therefore, a change in the price of one good can lead to a change in the supply of another good. When the price of the other good, which is corn, has increased relative to the price of wheat, then the farmer will switch production, or will switch the supply of corn. Okay, will switch. That will lead to a switching of production from wheat to corn, because corn will, the farmer is able to gain higher profits from producing corn than from producing wheat. Number of producers. Of course, more producers means higher supply. When you have more suppliers, more producers, the expectation is that the supply of goods will increase. Therefore, more producers means higher supply, which means the supply curve will shift to the right, causing more production. With more producers, it means higher production of a good or a service, which implies that the supply curve will shift to the right. Expectation of a future price. Remember, we talked about an expectation of future price is also a factor of demand. We said that with respect to the demand, we said, if you remember, we said an expectation of higher price in the future will cause the demanders, the buyers, the purchasers, to buy a good now, which means the present demand will increase. Why should I, if I expect the price to become higher next month, why should I buy it next month? I just buy it now. Therefore, the present demand will increase, that is, it will shift to the right. Now, what about the supply? The same factor also is a factor of supply. And expectation, you remember that farmers, only farmers, their main concern is that the price of the good they are producing goes up. The price of the good they are producing goes up. So they are mainly concerning about the higher prices. So if there is an expectation of a higher price next month of their good, then what will happen? The firm or producers will not produce now. Why? Because they have to wait till next month when the price of their good goes up so that they can take advantage of the higher price. So an expectation of a higher price next month will cause the supply or the present supply or the current supply to decrease, to go down. Why farmers or producer should produce now, okay, if the price of the good next month is going to go up, so they can, reduce their production now so that they can take advantage of the higher price next month. So when when there is an expectation of a higher price next month, that means the current or the present supply will decrease, that it will shift to the left. Another factor that basically, affect the supply is we're talking about taxes and subsidies. Taxes and subsidies. Taxes means you pay taxes. Subsidies means you gain money to produce a certain goods. You are getting help. You're getting aid. However, with respect to taxes, you have to pay taxes to the government. On the other hand, when you say subsidy, it means you are getting help from the government. Therefore, the imposition of a tax on a good will cause the per unit cost of the good to increase, leading to a leftward shift in the supply curve. So, the imposition of a tax can cause the supply curve of the good. The imposition of a tax on a good can cause the supply curve of that good to shift to the left, causing less production of that good. However, the subsidy have the opposite effect. The subsidy have the opposite effect. Of course, when a good is subsidized, that is getting help from the government or from other agencies, that implies then the quantity supplied of the good is greater at each price, and the supply curve of the good shifts to the right, shifts to the right. So the imposition of a tax can cause the supply curve to shift to the left. However, the subsidy, can cause the supply curve to shift to the right. Why? Because with subsidy, you are able to produce more at each and every price. And that causes the supply curve to shift to the right. Over here, with respect to the tax, it causes the supply curve to shift to the left, causing less production of good and service. However, here, it will cause more production of the good that is subsidized. Now, another factor that can cause the supply to shift is government restrictions. One of the government restrictions is government import quota. So, restrictions such as import quota on foreign goods will cause the supply curve of these goods to decrease. That is to shift leftward. So, for instance, if the government imposes an import quota on, Egyptian potatoes. That implies the supply of Egyptian potatoes will decrease, which implies less potatoes available in the country. The supply curve will shift to the left. Of course, with the elimination or the cancellation of the import quota, then the supply of the good, that used to have an import quota on it will increase. So with the elimination of import quota, the supply of the good, it's expected that the supply of the good will increase. Licensure is another factor, another factor within the government restrictions that is used to sometimes restrict, the supply of certain goods or services. With licensure, individuals must meet certain requirements before they can legally carry out a task. There are many, tasks that are subject to licensure, So, no doubt that the requirement, that is imposed by the government based upon the licensure can cause the supply curve of the task to decrease. Why? Because, when you have when you should meet certain requirements to engage in that task, then this means that the supply of that task will decrease. So licensure is another factor that the government can use to reduce certain tax, the supply of certain tax. Now let us basically differentiate between two terms. We have already discussed that when we talked about the demand. Now in supply, we have to differentiate between a change in supply and a change in the quantity supply. Okay? A change in supply refers to a shift in the supply curve, either an increase or a decrease in the supply curve. That is, when we say supply increases, it means it shifts to the right. When we say supply decreases, it means it shifts to the left. So a change in supply refers to a shifting of the supply curve, either to the right or to the left. Of course, what causes a change in supply? Of course, these factors that we have already talked about. These factors are shifter factors. They can cause a change in supply. A change in these factors will cause a change in supply. That is, will cause the supply curve to shift either to the right or to the left. Now, as you can see here in this case, the supply shift to the right from S1 to S2. Okay? And I said here, the factors that can cause the supply curve to shift are the ones just explained. We're talking about those factors. Now, a change in the quantity supplied, of course, it refers to a movement along the supply curve. The only factor that can cause a change in the quantity supplied is the price of the good itself, which is the only price. So here, a change in quantity supplied refers to a movement along a supply curve, as illustrated below here. Movement from A to B. The only factor that can cause a change in the quantity supplied is the factor along the vertical axis, which is the price of the good itself, which is the only price. So the only factor that can cause a change in the quantity supplied, that is a movement along the supply curve, either up or down, is the price of the good.